Hello everyone, welcome to my homemade trading card game, Sandbag. Today I'm going to be explaining how to play the game. The first part of this, we're going to be going into the rules, and in the second part we're going to be going into ways that you can actually play the game, not just the rules, but how you would be able to play. So without further ado, let's get into the rules. So you can find the rules if you just go into this Google site. The link will be down below. On the website, what I would do is just zoom out a little bit, just get to the rules a little bit better. So I'm just gonna zoom out, just get the whole thing on my screen. So the first thing about the rules to go into is the setup. Both players will have their own 50 card deck and 3 card location deck, which is like sort of like an extra deck if you play Yu-Gi-Oh! The location deck has to have 3 different location cards. The order doesn't matter because it's kind of like an extra deck. And in their main deck, a player can have 3 copies of techs and creatures, which are 2 different types of cards. So I can run 3 copies of one creature, 3 copies of another creature, 3 copies of a tech. I can run less than 3 copies, but I can't run like 4 copies. And then the player can have any amount of sandbags as long as their total deck cost is less than 11, which we'll get into later. But basically, different sandbags have a different deck cost depending on how good they are. It'll be able to run less copies of them. So in order to set up, both players will shuffle their decks and draw a hand of 4 cards. They can then put any number of those cards on the bottom of their deck and draw an equal number of replacement cards. The deck will not then be shuffled, so any cards that you put on the bottom of your deck you might not be getting back for a while, so that's something to be careful of. In terms of just a little bit of strategic advice, I usually just say put the later game cards on the bottom of your deck and make sure to run somewhere in your deck something that will shuffle so that anything you put on the bottom of your deck you don't have to worry about losing it forever. So then you'll determine who goes first. So you will not know before putting back your cards whether you're going first or second. And you can determine this randomly or not, either way. So that could be a strategic thing or just completely random. In terms of actual stats, both players are going to start with 16 health, and the goal of the game is to reduce your opponent to 0 health by doing damage to their health. All right. So here are the actual main kind of golden rules, I guess you could say. First is that player can only have up to 3 creatures on their field. Second is that to activate a location, you have to discard a sandbag, and we'll get more into that in the turn, but basically a location is going to be staying in play, affecting both players. When you activate a location, you're going to discard any other location in play. There can only be one location, regardless of who is playing what locations. So if I play a location and you had a location in play, your location will be discarded. Big strategic tip here is that since you'll only have 3 locations, you want to kind of reserve them so that you're not going to run out of locations, because that way you have a chance of having the last location in play, which is a big advantage because although locations affect both players, you will generally have locations in your deck that are better for you than your opponent. But yeah, in order to activate a location, you just discard a sandbag. We'll get back to it later though. Tech cards are basically cards that are just reading the card explains the card. You can't play a tech card, but it will have some explanation on the card of just what it does, how it works. So far, there's just 2, and what they both do is they just have some effect that can be activated when you're attacked by doing something with the card, like removing it from the game or discarding it. Creatures are another type of card. They not only have effects and a name, but also stats and creature type. The creature type is going to be important mostly for effects. So you could have a soldier, and then you could have a location that says all your soldiers get +1 in each stat. So that's how it might matter that your creature is a soldier. And the stats are going to be written in the order attack, speed, defense, with dashes in between. So if my creature is a 4, 4, 3, that means it has 4 attack, 4 speed, and 3 defense. Another thing about effects of creatures is that oftentimes an effect a creature has is a cost, which is going to be in order to play this, you have to discard a sandbag, or you have to discard 2 creatures, if something says to discard a card, you're going to have to discard it from your hand. But some cards will specify that has to be discarded from play or discarded from somewhere else, or sometimes the cost isn't even discarding something. So there's a big variety of costs, but basically anything that says like you have to do this in order to play this card is considered a cost. Finally, when attacking a player, a card deals damage equal to its attack. So if I had 16 attack, I was attacked by a 4 attack creature, I would have 12 health. When attacking a creature, if the attacker's attack is at least the target's defense, the target is destroyed. So the attacker is winning ties. So if I have a 4 attack creature attacks a 4 defense creature, the 4 defense creature will be destroyed. If I have a 4 attack creature attacks a 5 attack creature, 5 defense creature, nothing's going to happen. Nobody's going to have anything happen to them. An important thing to note here is you do not get attacked back. So I'm not going to say that there's no risk when attacking. There is risk, but when you attack, you're not going to get destroyed just because your creature is weaker. And a creature cannot attack a player who controls a creature with more defense than the creature's speed. That sounds confusing. It's less confusing than it sounds. Basically, your creature's speed will determine whether it can attack your opponent. So if I have a 3 speed creature and I want it to attack my opponent, it's only going to be able to if my opponent has not a single creature with more than 3 defense. So I have a creature with 4 defense. Nobody with less than 4 speed will be able to attack me, meaning you'll have to destroy that creature with 4 defense to actually attack your opponent. If your opponent just doesn't have any creatures, then you can just attack them because they don't have anything with any defense. So that's how that works. Now here's the turn in order. What's going to happen? So the first thing you'll do on the turn is just any effects that activate at the start of the turn activate. They might not be yours, but whoever's they are, they're going to activate. The second part is that you draw a card. So the turn player is just whoever's turn it is. So then you can then play any number of creatures from your hand, as long as you're not having more than 3 creatures, because that would not be allowed. As you can see, if we go back to the rules, the player can only have up to 3 creatures on their field. So then you can also activate up to 1 location. So you can't activate a location twice, but in order to activate a location, like I said, once it's at step 3 of your turn, you just discard Sandbag, activate the location. We'll talk a little bit more about Sandbags later, but what's really cool about Sandbags, they're not going to do anything except generally when they're discarded or when they're in the discard pile. So discarding Sandbags is actually generally a good thing to do. The only challenge with it is that you have to actually have the Sandbags in your hand. Now, fourth thing, each of the turn player's creatures can attack once. They can attack your opponent if they have enough speed, or just one of your opponent's creatures. And generally, if you're not going to destroy the target, then just don't even bother attacking. It's just something I'd say. So sometimes you're not even going to attack with your creature, you'll just leave it on the board. And then fifth is, if the turn player controls exactly 1 creature, they draw 2 cards. This does not have an official name yet, but I like to call it the ace card clause. And basically that's a way to get back hand size when you're in a bad situation. And in general, a nice strategy if you're trying to play a little bit more defensive, a little bit more consistent, is just keeping a creature that you know you'll be able to play in your hand at all times. That way, if everything, goes badly, you can always just on your turn play that creature and draw 2 cards and get a little bit of a better hand. And you're not worried about like draw for turn and draw some terrible card that doesn't help you at all. And sixth, it's just going to be any effects that activate at the end of the turn are going to activate. There is no main phase 2. For those of you who play Yu-Gi-Oh! This is much more like Pokemon if you play Pokemon, or Vanguard if you play Vanguard. I forget whether Magic has a main phase 2. I think it does. But there is no main phase 2, so you can't start playing creatures again after attacking. And here's a little important note here. Step 4 is going to be skipped on the first turn of the game. So when you're going first on your first turn, you can't attack. And then step 5 is going to be skipped on both players' turn, because this is more of a comeback mechanic, or like a kind of defensive late game strategic mechanic that you're not going to be allowed to do it immediately. So on my first turn, I have like one creature that I want to play, and there's some other cards in my hand, but they just don't make any sense to play them, so I just play one creature. But I'm still not going to draw 2 cards because it's the first turn. And then my opponent, let's say they only play one creature, they're not going to draw 2 cards because it's their first turn. But, on my second turn, I might be able to draw 2 cards from that effect. And now for the card. So there are 4 types of cards. One thing I will note is that we'll get to something called untapped.in later. Some of you might already be familiar with it, but not all of these cards look the same on untapped.in because some things I had to do when I was uploading them to make sure the blur wasn't too bad, and also just like I kind of designed this game twice, so some of these cards have like the original design, so creatures might not look like they have this entire layout and formatting, and text might look a little bit different. Sandbags might be just like phrased a little bit differently. Locations are mostly going to be the same, but I wouldn't worry about it. Basically, what's important is you'll know what a type of card a card is based on what it says on the card. So a location is going to be like one, like thematically, it's going to be a location. 2, you're going to know that's a location if basically it just has this effect, title, and image. So yes, it's going to be seeming very similar to a tech, but the important thing to note is a location is going to have an effect. It's going to do something that is going to be something it can do just by being in play. You can't actually play a tech unlike a location. So the tech is going to be saying something about like some way of activating it, like discarding it or something. So that's how you can tell the difference between a location and a tech. Also, this is going to change. There are going to be more techs, but right now the only techs are Ricochet, Railgun, and Shield. Then, in addition to a title, image, and effect, sandbags also have a deck cost. So if you look at this deck cost right here, the regular sandbag has 0 because it's a regular sandbag. You can run as many of them as you want. But there are other sandbags that have like 1 deck cost. And so because you only have a total of 11 deck cost, as you can see right here, player has any amount of sandbags, the their total deck cost is less than 11. Basically, let's say I could have maybe 7 regular sandbags. They all cost 0, so that's a total of 0 so far. And then I could have a sandbag that costs 1, and another sandbag that costs another 1, maybe another sandbag that costs 2. So that's a total of 4 so far. And I could run another sandbag that has a deck cost of 4. So now I have a total of 8 deck cost. And I could run another sandbag that costs 3. I had 11 total deck costs. So you can really customize it. The question with the deck cost is generally basically, I'd say, 1, how much do you want to be drawing sandbags? 2 is just, do you want to have more sandbags or better sandbags? And depending on your deck, the higher deck cost sandbags might not even actually be particularly better. So that is also something to watch out for, is don't just assume that the higher cost sandbag is better. It all depends on your deck, really. And then creature, you'll see right here, these 3 numbers, it's very small because I zoomed out, but yeah, this is a 3/3/3. So it has 3 attack, 3 speed, 3 defense. It's a machine. It has this effect, so discard 2 sandbags to play this. That would be considered a cost. And then this gets +1 attack per location in your discard pile. So that's a nice little effect. It'll power it up over time. Has its title and its image. So I'm just going to zoom back out. And yeah, those are all the types of cards. And that's it. The game's really not super complicated. So now I'm going to go into basically how you can actually play the game, because I'm going to be totally honest, you're probably not going to be able to get any physical cards because I have not put this game on sale, and I don't really intend to for a while, if ever. So here's how you can play the game anyway. So yeah, as it says, it's not on sale, but you can play it on a website called untapped.in, which is, even if you don't intend on playing this game, check out this website. You can basically play any trading card game on it. It's just a manual trading card game player, basically. Kind of like Tabletop Simulator, I guess. But here I do have what would be structure decks for pre-built decks. So there are 4 pre-built decks right now. There's the Ascendant Arsenal, the Dawn of Darkness, Terran Transcendence, and Soldier's Scheme. And if you look down here, there's like a little bit about just like blurbs of, oh, this deck has these cards which are cool and it can do these combos. So this is like for uh, Soldier Scheme. You can use Motorcycle Champ again and Leader of the Charge with locations to maximize the aggression of your soldiers. Like it's just kind of like advertisements, I guess you could say. So you can look down there if you're a little bit interested in what kind of cards might be in the deck. But in terms of deck types, yeah, Ascendant Arsenal is really an all-rounder deck. The theme of that deck is to play powerful machine cards without paying the cost. That's why I mentioned costs. It's because that deck does have some abilities that allows you to bypass the cost, allowing you to play some really powerful cards pretty easily. And then there's this deck list, which I'll show you how to actually upload this deck list onto Untap.in. Then there's Dawn of Darkness, which is kind of like a control deck. It has a lot of kind of not particularly crazy creatures, but it has a really powerful location called Yamigotica, which basically board wipes everything other than cards in its archetype, which can be really devastating. And it's also just a really good deck from a straightforward kind of perspective. So it's got a lot of creatures that are pretty easy to play, and it doesn't really brick very easily. So if you're somebody who's I don't know, play a lot of Magic or something, and you always drawing hands full of lands, then and you really hate that, maybe this is a good deck for you, because it's just very kind of smooth running deck. But honestly, so is Ascendant Arsenal. Terran Transcendence is a little bit less smooth running, I'd say. It's a late game deck, so a lot of your cards are meant for kind of later in the game. Its entire theme is it builds up a discard pile and then has some creatures that get buffed for having more cards in your discard pile. And some of those can get really good in the late game, but just in the early game are not necessarily as impressive. But I definitely say this deck is very playable. I'd recommend it if you're kind of a, I guess it would be good for like a combo player. So if you're, we'll go back to Magic. If you play Magic and you like kind of like going infinite, or um, just like building up this like big board and then making your attack, or doing whatever kind of stuff you want to do, or if you're like a Yu-Gi-Oh player, if you like playing like Light Sworns, it's kind of like similar-ish to that. Um, but the only difference I'd say is it doesn't have like a acceleration endgame. An acceleration strategy is very much a late game deck. It's all about patience. And then you've got Soldier Scheme, which is the complete opposite. It's aggression deck. You're kind of, if you're somebody who wants to get like the like one turn kill or whatever, one turn kill is almost impossible, but this is the deck that is going to be able to do it, I guess, because this deck really, it has a lot of abilities that can buff its creatures, and all of its creatures are really kind of fast to play, and they can get down on the board really quickly. But your one weakness is recovery. Like, you can make this huge explosive turn, but are you going to be able to recover if it fails? Maybe, maybe not. So I really recommend this deck for anybody who's just really interested in playing aggro. So let's say you want to play Ascendant Arsenal. You can now basically highlight this entire deck list, including the like deck 1, deck 2 thing. You can now just Command C or copy, however you copy on your computer or whatever. You can even do this on a phone. It's a lot less nice, but you can do it on a phone. And then you can just go to untap.in. Yes, I do play a lot of Vanguard. If you're wondering, I do play a lot of Vanguard. That's why there's a lot of Vanguard decks here. You can go into create deck, not card fight Vanguard. You'll want to go to custom CCG. And I'm just going to title this deck Sandbag so I know what game it's for. And then I'll click create deck. Create cube is like if you want to make a draft. So I would not recommend that unless you really understand the interface. But yeah. Then instead of like going and searching every single individual card and like looking through the database, you can do paste deck. And I'll just paste that deck list that I copied. And I can click import cards. And then it says that some cards do not get imported automatically, so I guess some things maybe failed to import. So I'll just look through this deck to see what it missed. One thing you'll notice is that it didn't put the locations in extra deck. So I can fix that. Just put it starts in second deck. Send it in my second deck. And I'll put, yeah, see here, this is what I was saying about these images are not all in the like same layout as what some of the other ones are that are actually in the proper layout, like Paradigm Patrol Bot. And then yeah, looks like one of my locations did not upload. Yeah, it says right here that it failed to import these two cards, so I'll just find them in the search bar. Oops. Now it's going to say that there were no results, but the reason it's going to say that is because these cards are all under custom cards. So I'll just access out so I can see the options here. But yeah, see this custom cards. So now if I click custom cards, it'll show up. And then it said the other card that fell to upport was Paradigm Y01. And if you don't know how many copies of it there were, you can go back into the website and check that out. But I'm not going to, just because I don't want to like lose the deck. But I do know that there was supposed to be one copy of this that failed to upload. So I'll bring it in, and this is at 4. I can just click this little minus sign to reduce that. I can save it. And so now I have that deck. Now, how am I going to use that deck? Well, I'm not going to show you an actual 1v1, but I'll show you just in solo. So I can click New CCG Game. If that wasn't what you were on, you can basically switch games with this little menu here. Not going to call it that. It's just like call my Vanguard games because that's the new era of Vanguard right now. But I'll just call it Sandbag. And then I'll just click solo. And I wouldn't worry about this, but I usually don't enable mirror player. But yeah, I mean, you would hopefully be able to play an actual 1v1. So, but you can switch the number of players here. Sandbag is really meant for 2 players. So yeah, if you want to come up with some special rules for more players, be my guest. So I can click this. It made my game. I'll enter my game. I'll choose my deck. I'll just choose that deck that we just made. It's actually funny. I apparently already had the deck made, but I did want to show how to actually make it. So it's good. And now this is actually a pretty, like, in my opinion, intuitive website. So it's all manual. You can switch turns here. There would normally be a switch turn button around here, but there's nobody that passed the turn to. So yeah, you can just click on my deck to do anything with my deck. I could scoop my deck. That means just like taking all your cards back. I can change my deck. I could choose some of these or flip the top card over. I could peep at the top card. I could find a card in my deck. So it's like if I want to search my deck, I can say, oh wait, I am using some ability and I'm searching my deck for this card. And now I can just add as my hand. I'll just keep my hand right here. And as long as you're using the right zones, like this is your hand, this is your deck, you should be good to go. So if you are looking for some kind of aid, these counters are really helpful. You can just click them depending on how you click them, depending on your device. It'll go up or down, so you can mark health with that. You can also insert counters with this. You can, if you don't want to be, this is the chat, which is really important. Just type in there or say something to your opponent. Generally nice to say hi at the start of a game. But if you don't want to do that, you can use these buttons to basically indicate certain things. This can untap all. Nothing officially taps in this game, but sometimes it's helpful just as a visual cue that you've attacked. You can roll dice. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do on this. I'll just explore, or if you're already familiar with it, then this game isn't really particularly different. So if you're interested, I'll make some more videos on how to avoid some kind of dangerous situations, or maybe even some kind of unfun situations. So yeah, there'll be some links down below.